think it's safe to say that Star Wars gaming towards the later stages of 2023 was pretty bad. We obviously had Minecraft Path of the Jedi, which was awesome, but it was a very short and sweet experience, and apart from that we didn't really get any news other than bad news because Star Wars Hunters got delayed into this year, and then there's all this stuff around the KOTOR remake potentially in trouble once again. Now, like I said in my predictions video, I wouldn't be surprised if Star Wars Hunters had an update fairly soon, but it definitely wasn't the best of ends to 2023, so today I wanted to be a little bit more positive and talk about 5 Star Wars games that I would like to see made, because I always have a ton of fun talking about these things on streams or just with friends. So today I thought I would talk to you about it in a video. But before I do get into that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with the notification bell turned on to never miss a piece of Star Wars gaming news, and comment below what games you would like to see made for Star Wars. So the first game I really want to see is obviously Star Wars Battlefront 3, but to be honest I actually think I'd prefer a remastered Battlefront 2 in a way. Now, they don't have to go crazy ham with the remaster side of things, just literally just turn it into a PS5 and Xbox Series S and X version instead of the PS4 version we can currently play. So upscale the textures a little bit more I guess, but it already just looks absolutely insane, so I don't honestly think they need to touch it at all. But there are definitely 2 ways that DICE could look at this. So if it was Battlefront 3, then to be honest we've already had so many times where we can play as Luke and Darth Vader on Endor or Tatooine, so my preferred way of doing a Battlefront 3 I think would just be to release it with entirely new stuff that's potentially focused on The Mandalorian, Andor, and all of the new TV shows, and even just the Clone Wars, Rebels, and Resistance shows, because we haven't really had a lot of content around them either. We obviously got a fair bit of Clone Wars stuff in the end, but in terms of like heroes and whatnot, there really wasn't a lot. So yeah, for the most part, entirely new weapons, heroes, maps, and everything is what I'd want to see from a Battlefront 3. But at the same time, I feel like you can't have a Battlefront game without the likes of Luke, Han, Leia, Vader, Palpatine, and so on. So I think if you essentially just remastered Battlefront 2 and released it with a bit of extra content like the Mustafar map, Ahsoka and Ventress that they were going to be doing in the next big update before it got axed, I think if you did that, that would be pretty solid, along with a few other things maybe. But then you essentially just continued the live service support that the game did have, so you're releasing updates pretty much every month or every 2 months, and within that, that's when they can start to focus on the other shows like The Mandalorian, Andor, and all the rest of it, because even though there would be a ton of things to catch up on, I think it would be really fun and probably the best way to see a new Battlefront game come to life. Now, I could talk about that in so much more detail, but I've obviously got another 4 games that I want to discuss, and I have sort of spoken about it before, so if you want to see me talk about that in more detail again, I could talk about it more on a stream sometime. So let me know if you want to see that in the comments, as well as the 5 games you'd like to see. Now, in failing a Battlefront 3, I'd then like to see a heroes versus villains dedicated game of some kind. Now, obviously there is Star Wars Hunters on the way, which essentially is a heroes versus villains game, but the big problem with Hunters is that it won't be on consoles besides the Switch, and it won't be on PC either, so I think that's definitely a gap that a heroes versus villains game could jump into. But at the same time, Hunters could just release later on with those consoles in mind, so I wouldn't say no to that either. But with Star Wars Hunters, it's obviously a game that focuses on a new original cast of characters, which I absolutely want to see them do more and more of. But with that releasing later this year, in maybe 2027 or 2028, so a few years down the line, maybe Hunters are starting to slow down in terms of content releases. Hopefully it won't, because I'd love to see that game go on for years and years to come, like Galaxy of Heroes has. But potentially a few years down the line, then we could see the likes of EA make a heroes versus villains game that then focuses on the usual characters and cast of people that we know and love, with the likes of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Boba Fett, and of course all the rest. And I think in similar fashion to Hunters, we could then see a couple of different game modes that are playable with these characters. But I think it'd be really exciting to have a game like that, or even Battlefront 3 again, like I said, where it gets updates based on what's actually releasing at the time. So let's say it comes out when Mando Season 4 is out, which will probably be some point next year. You can then add the likes of Din Djarin and other people in the show as playable characters in the game, and I think that would just be really exciting. It would probably get more people playing that game as well, because they've watched the show and then they see that they can play as these characters in this game, so I think that would definitely be a good thing to see. Now again, if you'd like to see a bit more detail in terms of that, then of course I can do another video on it. And to be honest, the same goes with these next 3 games as well. If you want to see videos on these in a bit more detail, or just a stream where I talk about all of them, then do let me know. But game number 3 is essentially just Star Wars Squadrons 2, which would span 4 eras instead of just the one, because Squadrons 1 focused on, it was essentially the original trilogy, but obviously it was sort of the 6 months after the Battle of Endor happened, but it's still that sort of Galactic Civil War era. But I would very much love to see a game with Squadrons 2, a bit like Star Wars Battlefront 2, where it has a main story that's focused focused in one particular area, but then has a multiplayer that's focused on everything else. So I'd actually quite like to see either the Squadrons story continued from Squadrons 1, where they end up in the Battle of Jakku as essentially the last battle. That, or I'd really like to see Vanguard Squadron in the sequel trilogy, where potentially the characters you saw before in Squadrons 1 are a lot older now in Squadrons 2 and they're still fighting for the cause. I think something like that would be really, really fun, as there just isn't too much stuff within the sequel trilogy and I'd really like to see more on that. But then as for the multiplayer, I'd really want to then see original trilogy again like we got in Squadrons, as well as the sequel trilogy and prequel trilogy, with the fourth era being of course the High Republic. By the time we essentially get this Squadrons 2 release, there'd be so much more stuff in the High Republic era. There's already a lot now anyway, but having things like the Jedi Vectors and the New Republic ship versus weird amalgamations of the Nile ships would just be so much fun, I think. So I would definitely be very keen on seeing that. This fourth game is something that I've wanted for a very long time, and that is a racing game that incorporates pod racing, bike racing with weapons like in the Bad Batch, and starfighter racing, essentially all in one game. Now I've genuinely wanted a racing game for years and years now already, and at first that pretty much was just pod racing, as we hadn't really seen any other racing in Star Wars much before. But then when Star Wars Resistance came out, I saw the potential for starfighter racing, because that's essentially what they're doing in that show. So I'd absolutely love to see a game like that, or at least a mode incorporated in this game. And then last year we had the Bad Batch with the speeder bike racing that had weapons and everything, which almost felt a little bit Mario Kart-esque. So something like that would honestly be incredible. Now I think it would be fun in a game like that to be able to essentially just customize our own pilot with different flight suits for different racing modes, and then also be able to customize our starfighters as well in different ways. A little bit like Squadrons in a way, I suppose, where there was tons of different skins, but then there were also loads of different parts that changed how your starfighter played. So in a game like this, having parts that changed the way your starfighter or speeder bike or pod racer plays would be really good, and some deep level of customization for that would also be a lot of fun. I wouldn't expect loads of modular parts so that you could essentially just completely create your own stuff, because that would be really cool, but I feel like it would also be a huge undertaking. But just having a wide variety of craft would honestly be fine for me, as long as then we have tons of different paint jobs on decals and everything like that. But most importantly, of course, is the actual modes themselves, and I think a wide-ranging racing game would be so much fun. Finally then, the game I really want to see is probably the game that I've wanted for the longest of times. It's essentially a little bit like GTA Online, but obviously with Star Wars, so essentially you can just create your own character and you can just do basically anything you want, whether that's races or mucking about in the open world online, being able to buy property and different vehicles and things like that, doing bounty hunting missions, smuggling, potentially having a big story as well. Just stuff like that with tons of different multiplayer modes as well would honestly be incredible. Alternatively, I'd also just love to see something a little bit like SWTOR but coming to consoles, and just a sort of upgraded version, potentially set in the High Republic, as to not mess around with the Old Republic timeline too much, as they are obviously still working on SWTOR. But I think the High Republic time would be quite a fun thing, because maybe you could get to play it as a Nile and do all these kind of different things. But something set any time would actually just be fine as well, because there are always going to be bounty hunters and smugglers in the galaxy. So I just think that would be a huge amount of fun as well. So guys, they are my personal top 5 Star Wars games that I really want to see made. I feel like a couple of these are definitely realistic in terms of what can be done, but my biggest fear ultimately is just that it's going to be years and years until any of these things probably happen. But like I said guys, let me know your top 5 games that you want to see for Star Wars in the comments, and if you want to see me do another 5 games like this, leave a like on this video so I know to do so. That is it from me today though. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you always.